8, he continues, he says, the yogi who is satisfied with knowledge and wisdom, who remains unshaken, who has conquered the senses, to whom a lump of earth, stone, and gold are the same, is said to be a realized one. So again, this is still talking about a self-realized soul. What he's talking about here is the attitude towards the objects of the world, the things in the world. So he uses 3 things here: earth, stone, and gold. So he uses those to represent the range of material wealth. So you have earth, dirt, which is pretty cheap and plentiful; stone, which can be used to build houses at least; and gold, which is of course a lot more valuable. Now, to the self-realized soul, what has he said? Earth, stone, and gold are the same. So the point that he's making here is obviously not a state of ignorance, right? To a 5-year-old, maybe a 5-year-old, to a 2-year-old, earth, stone, gold, same. They'll pick up the stone because it might be prettier than the gold. Who knows? Whatever. There's no distinction of value. The child will eat dirt, not recognize it should not. So there's no distinction in the value of earth, stone, and gold for a child. This is not obviously what he's talking about here. The self-realized soul sees them the same because he recognizes that their essence is the same. Their value is the same from that perspective, which is 0. So if you look at, if you recall the Vedanta treatise, I think it's chapter 13, he's talking about the state of renunciation. And he's talking about sense objects. And he says, he calls the sense objects, to the one who has renunciation, the sense objects are ephemeral and valueless. Right? Sense objects have no value for what? So gold, you can't say gold has no value. It does have value. If you have gold in your pocket, you can buy food and clothing and shelter in a house. You can buy other sense objects. Of course it does. Stone has value. You can make a house out of it. You've got enough of it. Dirt has value. You can put a seed in it and grow food. So to say these things have no value, how can that be the case? From what perspective do they have no value?
In and of itself.
In and of itself, from the self. Yeah, so from the perspective of the self, they have no value. But even before that, from the perspective of our own self-development, from the perspective of our own growth, they have no value. It doesn't, this is what he was saying earlier on, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are around you. If you're wealthy, you can practice self-development. If you're poor, you can practice self-development. If you're poor and become rich, you can still practice self-development. If you're rich and become poor, you can still practice self-development. So what effect does earth, stone, and gold have on your practice of self-development? Nothing. It doesn't do anything. Your practice is your practice. A man must lift himself by himself. It's purely an internal discipline. So from the perspective of our own growth and development, gold is not going to help us. Stone is not going to help us. Mud is not going to help us. So that's the perspective that the self-realized soul takes. Even beyond that, okay, that's the perspective even that any one of us can take. But a self-realized soul adopts that perspective even from a higher platform. Everything is in and of itself essenceless. Has no value with respect to the self. And so that's how he can see everything as the same. So again, it comes back to this idea, you tempt him with gold. You tell the self-realized soul, like if you just, everything you're saying is perfect, but that thing about, not striving for success, can you just leave that out of your lectures? Yeah, I'll write you a nice big check. Just leave that out of your lectures. The nice big check won't have any influence. You won't care because he has no value for the money, no value for the gold. So this is what he's saying. You can't be tempted by gold, by stone, or by earth, when you have that higher perspective. They have no value for you. Yeah, gold, I've got a house already. I've got enough food. I've got enough clothing. I've got enough income. I don't need more. So you can't entice him because he recognizes its intrinsic worth. So that's how he views the different aspects of the world. Then he describes what that person is like. He says, satisfied with knowledge and wisdom, who remains unshaken, who has conquered the senses. So again, we've got intellect, mind, and body here. So this is instructive in terms of describing that state, but that's really only instructive in terms of giving us a direction for our efforts. So again, verse 5, a person must lift themselves, put their own efforts in. Well, what are the efforts directed towards? Conquering the senses, emotionally remaining unshaken, and being satisfied with knowledge and wisdom. So the practice at the physical level is sense control, self-control, as we discussed earlier. The knowledge and wisdom. Reflect upon higher values, it becomes wisdom. And at the emotional level, we maintain a sense of mental peace because we have that correct understanding and because we've been acting in ways that are in line with our own conscience and conviction. So this is the practice, and it's the state. It gives us both. The practice matures into the state, put it that way. Or put another way, you at any given moment, you are in a particular state. You're in a state of immature development right now. And as you practice, your state gradually evolves. It matures until it comes to a culmination in self-realization. So the practice indicates the state, and the state indicates the practice.